Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another of our Evolving HR Expert webinars. I am joined today by, I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a minute, but I am joined by Jessie, Peter and Terry for this conversation around HRIS, or getting the best system in place for your organisation. I will say that poor old Terry, they've just started drilling outside where she is. So she's going to try and put herself on mute when she's not speaking so that it doesn't disrupt the sound. But apologies to any of you. Nothing we can do about what people are doing next door. So Jessie, do you want to introduce yourself first? Just quickly, let people know who you are and what you do.
Sure, thanks, Kirsty. And I'm excited for this. This is my first webinar in a while, actually. So I'm excited for this. I'm founder of Stacked. You may have heard of Stacked for HR tech database. So you can go there and find all the different HR tech that's on the market. We try to make it as simple and unbiased as possible to really help you decide before you jump into sales processes, what could suit your business, because no one likes to be chased by the sales teams. We all have to be honest about that. But we do want to also find what's right for our business. So that's basically me. Before that, I was in HR leadership and some scale ups in Germany. Before that, could you even believe they've worked before 7 years ago? It feels like a long time. I was in the Australian government, actually. So I'm Australian, worked for parliamentary services, criminal intelligence, doing large scale projects for the government, and then kind of fell into this HR topic and loved it. So that's why I stayed here. Yeah, that's me.
I didn't even know that about you. I mean, I knew you were Australian, but I didn't know you used to work in government. That's really interesting. Peter, do you want to tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Of course, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Hall. So I head up the customer team. So I'm director of customer at Suzanne. So Suzanne HR provides the sort of HR and payroll software for UK based sort of organisations, but we've also worked internationally. I promise I will not be going on about Suzanne's Day. I'm very much here in my role to kind of, I've worked with hundreds of organisations who've implemented HR systems, and I think I've seen a wide variety of challenges that they face. I think a lot of the questions we're going to go through today I'll be able to talk to. That's been my life. I joined Suzanne pretty much straight out of uni. I've sort of been here for coming up to 12 years now. So I've seen the business grow from where we supported kind of those organizations who are literally just getting started, selecting their first system, through to now larger businesses, multinationals, etc. So yeah, as I say, hopefully I can offer a bit of insight on the various different journeys I've seen and continue to help contribute towards.
That's brilliant. And Terry?
So hopefully I'll do it in between drilling. So I'm Terry Wilcox. I work for a company, I'm co-founder and director of a company called Lemon Platypus. And what we do is we help people on their HR tech journey. So we help from implementation through to, from procurement through to implementation through to support afterwards. So background for me is I've been working in HR technology, a bit of a HR technology self-confessed geek, not going to lie. I started off as a HR analyst and been working a HRIS analyst 20 odd years ago, which is really scary, and working with a multitude of systems. And one of the things that we really try and say for us is we are HR people. We are from through and through. And we just love technology. So that's why we try and help people on their journey for HR technology, is because we understand it. We've lived in their shoes, looked after myself, ginormous workday teams, multi-global national organisations, looked after payroll teams, reward teams and stuff like that. So we understand some of the challenges. So when we're going through and helping people get the right system, supporting it, implementing it, we've been them. So we do some of it. We can walk in their shoes when you're trying to do a big implementation like this, and you still got BAU to do as well. But obviously, they're the things we'll be touching on today. So that's me.
And although I'm facilitating the conversation, because from a technical perspective, I don't think I can add very much at all to this conversation. But in my HR career, I have probably fairly badly handled the selection and implementation of more than one HR tech system, and so. This is, a lot of the topics that we do for these webinars are things that I struggled with in my own HR career. So I know I usually make the assumption that I'm not the only one that has, you know, struggled with this in the past. So this felt like a really good topic to talk about. So let me start off with, and I'll come to each of you with the questions, but Jessie, if you wouldn't mind answering this one first, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that HR professionals face when they're selecting tech?
Oh, it's a good question. The biggest challenges. So like you, I've, you know, seen some well done and not so well done implementations. I've been part of well done and not well done implementations as well. I think the biggest challenge that I noticed was recurring around like what success looks like and what is less successful is around knowing what you actually need as a business. I mean, it sounds very simple, but really understanding and taking that time to plan up front and align it to your business strategy. So looking at, you know, that's the biggest challenge, actually aligning it to your business strategy, like having a people strategy, having that conversation with executive, being part of those discussions and really pushing, if you're in a leadership position, to have that connection to what's going on, because without that, you really can't build core infrastructure into a business. And I find a lot of teams are potentially the first hire in HR, they're throwing this project on the side like it's just pick a system, you know, and it's not really, they're not really involved in where's the business going, and they're not throwing a lot of budget either. They're like, just, you know, hurry up, more or less. And it can be really overwhelming. So I think that is the biggest challenge that I've seen, like really getting that support from executive firstly, having the alignment to the business strategy, and then really feeling like confident that you know what the business needs for at least the like short to medium term future. If you're a fast moving business, you might need to swap at some point, right? But you need to at least have a good idea of what's coming in the future to pick the right tool. Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I've seen.
Yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense. Peter, what are some of the things that you've seen in terms of challenges around choosing?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to pick up on what Jessie mentioned, one of the big challenges is it's a super crowded marketplace as well, right? There's a lot of different vendors, and particularly when, it's quite interesting, I laughed in the comment when you mentioned about BAU and implementation, someone's like, yes, that. You know, when you've got your day job, you've actually got the sort of the HRIR type issues that you might be dealing with as well. Going through that selection process itself and how you structure that when there are so many kind of, so many different providers who provide variations on similar things, sometimes quite different, that can be quite a daunting prospect to begin with. And again, you know, you might be, as Jessie said, somebody, a single resource in the team trying to pick all of that up. So yeah, I would, from my side, I think, as well as the business piece, it's actually what you're looking for from the vendor. So that is not just a functionality perspective as well, but it's considering your position, your HR team's position, potentially in terms of availability. What are you going to need from support? What's your expectation going to be from a vendor? Because you could meet with a vendor who seems to have everything, but then actually, you know, it's what support are you going to get on the ground? What are they going to do to help implement the functionality as well? So yeah, building up that picture, and I think kind of taking stock and then going into that journey is one of the big bits of advice I would give sort of to anybody who's in that prospective position.
And Deborah's just put a comment in the chat saying it really helps to know your budget before you start looking. And I would say, yeah, I've been on I have been in a position where they wanted to know what the options were before they would agree on any kind of budget. And it's a piece of string, isn't it, with some of the providers? Like you said, Peter, you said crowded marketplace, and it's almost impossible. You cannot go to a leadership team and go, this is what it's going to cost, because there are so many different things that take into consideration. So yeah, it's I guess it's really like the knowledge that you need to have before you can even get started is sometimes difficult for people who don't have to deal with these sorts of situations and these sorts of products very often, because you don't know what you don't know, which is a tough one. But yeah, Terry, what would you add to that in terms of challenges?
I think it's like everything that the guys have said, where it's what we try and do when we go through, because we help everyone needs any help as well. We help through the procurement process, and the big thing is we sit down and say, okay, what are your challenges at the moment? You know, what is it that you're trying to solve with bringing in the system? And I think that's a really important point to say, okay, you know, is it that, you know, our people are continually doing manual processes, or is it, hey, we've just brought on a new site, they're global, and our system can't deal with the time off policies for it, so we're having to do things manually. So it's understanding, okay, what are some of those pain points that you're trying to fix with this new system? And with that, you know, it's then understanding, okay, so if we hit X, Y, Z, will that fit it? Because I think it's really important. Like, HRIS is such a wide thing. What does it actually mean? Is it core HR? Is it a talent system? Is it, you know, a recruitment system? Because on top of that, you may say, well, actually, I want a best in breed. I want one that does everything. And then you go and speak to your vendor, and they're like, okay, that's fine. You're hiring 10 positions next year, but actually the model we have, we're paying per seat. So you're actually, you know, those 10 positions are actually going to cost you a lot more money. So you know, at that point, it's understanding, okay, what do we need to address? And I think sometimes, especially being in HR, it can be quite blinkered on what you think you actually need. So it's going out to find out your external stakeholders. You know, what are their pain points? What do they hate? I actually hate going in the HR system. It's so boring. It's so clunky. I go in, I put my holiday in, I come out, and stuff like that. But actually, you know, and then your downstream people, your finance team, what do they need? Actually, it'd be really great if we could have X, Y, Z. Your IT team needs, and they're like, hey, compliance is a huge thing for us. We need SSO and provisioning, and mapping out what that is. Then exactly what Deborah said is like, you know, you can see some of the systems, all bells and whistles, and you're like, oh my God, it's so pretty. I love it. I really, really want it. But actually, the MVP of what we actually need, that, you know, viable product, it might be great at performance, but actually it's not going to sort out your automation. So it's understanding your budget, because we got Workday budget, but spreadsheet price, you know, Workday aspirations, but spreadsheet prices. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, because you could go through, because it takes ages to go through this vendor process, and a lot of times, because you're going to see in a couple, and it's a waste of time by the end, because some of them won't give you the prices up front. You absolutely love it, and then suddenly you get the pricing, you're like, oh, so what? You know. So when we go through with people, we ask, and you know, I hate when people are like, when we've worked with vendors and they're like, oh, we won't tell you the price until the end. We're like, but what's your budget? And you're like, well, why are you asking our budget? Because you want to give us a price that is going to fit our budget, or is it? So I think, you know, that was a lot to say, but I think the key is understand what you want, because then you can find out what the system best meets your needs. But it's again what the guys were saying as well, is it's like, you know, we've worked with people who, okay, we've got 100 people. We're 100 people now. We've got 5 vacancies. We find a system. They don't really, you know, but actually they're going to be, you know, they've got 200 vacancies by the end of the year. So that one recruitment system that they're using is no longer fit for purpose. They might have signed up for 24, you know, months and stuff like that. So it's understanding what it is now, but also, you know, in the present.
Nice. It reminds me of I mean, I worked for a company for a long time that was the second largest privately owned company in the States, over 100,000 employees. But I had to use an Excel spreadsheet because their system that they'd had in place for many years only really worked in America. So it had all of our salaries were dollars, but they didn't convert them. They just took the number that our salary was and put a dollar sign in front of it. And for some really bizarre reason that I've never been able to understand, everyone outside the US had the birth date of 1st of January 1900. So we were all like 120 years old, which was spectacular. And I couldn't understand why date of birth was somehow linked to geographical location, but they couldn't seem to fix it. So we were all like 120 years old, and ended up using just an Excel spreadsheet because that's the only way that I could get information, which is quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, there were several projects over the time that I was there, because I was there for almost over a decade, of trying to find one system that would work internationally for all of those disparate businesses. And in the end, it was like, no, we'll just keep going with separate ones. But the challenges vary so much, because I think the company I worked at after that was a tiny startup of 40 people, and I needed an applicant tracking system. That would have done, and so that was a very different experience. But anyway, so what are some of the things that an organization needs to think about to assess whether they even need a tech solution? And Peter, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's taking a step back and consulting the challenges that you face in your day-to-day role, and maybe some of the challenges being experienced by the wider business. For instance, things like sort of, do you find that you're taking a lot of time to build reports for board or C-suite level, or for sort of your manager? Is that something that is a time-consuming activity? What are the things that are taking you away from delivering the kind of the high-value work that you can put into an organization? I think if you then have that picture, if you focus a little bit more widely on sort of, wider business needs, then that gives you an idea of what's going to help address that gap. Again, it comes back to that kind of then consulting with what's on the market and the vendors that might be able to help with that. But I think if you establish those business challenges, that's then the scene setter for what's going to make the difference. There are obvious things like size of organization. I think you've just summarized it perfectly there, Kirsty, with regards to kind of that difference between joining an organization that's got 40 people versus 100,000 plus. There are some clear characteristics there that will make the distinction as to how impactful a system might be. But I would get to that granular level and sort of note it down and then read it through, and that's going to give you an idea of what functionality that systems might offer might help. It can start to give you a bit of a figure that will put a time against it that's going to kind of save things. And I think it then comes back actually to the first point that I think Jesse was making, which that's then also your argument for commercial value to get budget to take a system forward as well. You're doing that analysis piece and creating that picture of sort of what's required from business support to kind of help get you moving on that. So yeah, and I think normally if you do break down those tasks, it also it allows you then to look out and hopefully help get through the myriad of different platforms that you could work with to the ones that are actually going to fit your need. Is it just an ATS system that you need because recruitment is super intensive, because having to do a lot of filtering that might be able to be kind of reduced in terms of time? Is it, as I said, is it the reporting kind of thing? So I think it's that distill it down to your activities where you can save time and where you can save time for business as well.
Definitely. Terry, what would you add to that in terms of that whole, whether you actually need a tech solution or not?
Yeah. I think, again, it just keeps coming back down to size and manageability. It always comes down to manage. Can you manage it on a spreadsheet? Yeah, you might be able to. Can you manage it? I've seen people using Monday.com as their solution. And, to be honest, once you put your automations and stuff, it's not too, it's not too bad. But it gets to a point of when it's like, it's coming back down to, well, what do you want to drive through it? So actually, there's some of the instances that, actually, hey, we want to suddenly do performance management and stuff. Hey, we want to do engagement. We want to do some surveys. It would be great if we could do some feedback. And then what you seem to find, I've seen, is you suddenly that you're, okay, well, we want to do surveys. We're going to go and get SurveyMonkey. We want to do this. So we're going to go and get that. By the time you've got all these little add-on tools, which are only £100 here, £500 there, it's actually the price of getting a all-in system that does everything. It's starting to be there. But I think manageability is a huge part about it. Personally, it's like,
yeah, that makes sense. And Jesse, what would you add to that?
In terms of deciding when you need a HRIS, it
Yeah,
comes
when and
down
whether, I
to
suppose. Yeah.
when and whether. So for me, what I always advocate is the first thing I said, which is people strategy, right? You don't just decide this quarter we need a HRIS, right? That's not something you should be doing. And whether or not it's going to help us, it's something that should be part of your business strategy. It's core infrastructure, like core infrastructure. It's the one that needs to work. It's the one that has all the data for finance. It's usually got payroll. It's like core. Whether that's in Monday or a spreadsheet, whatever it is core. And I think what we lack a little bit and why we get a little bit of, let's say, distrust from the business or not as much support for things is because we're not coming at things proactively. We need to be, and I know we don't have time, trust me, I know it, I've been there, but I joined I joined a scale up, really, really fast moving scale up, 100 people per month scale up.
Oh my goodness.
Actually, there was even 150 at one point across 19 countries. We had a tool that was a country specific tool because it started in Germany. I got there and it was like, hey, we're going to onboard all these people and you're responsible for all these things. And I was like, hang on a minute, we are not doing any of that ramp up. We're not getting anyone this business on that tool. We cannot do that. And I was like, no one had thought about the business strategy and the actual execution impact of not having the right HR tech in that scenario. So it was like everyone was all good, ops were good, finance were good, everyone was ready, HR were not ready. There was no roadmap, there was no strategy around the infrastructure and process around how we're going to get that many people into the business and capture them into the system. And so always, if you don't have a people strategy connected to the business that's thought through in advance, that's taught through with leadership, bought into by leadership, we need a new HRIS because we have this and this and this coming up. It's relying on this and this and this. If you're in, say yes. If you're out, say no, but here's the consequences, Like we need to start getting really clear about why we need tech. Because I tell you what, there's a lot of tech out there. That's why I have this database. There's over 300 products in there. I have a list of about 600 I could have in the database. There is that much tech. Probably it could be 2,000 if I really wanted to have 2,000. But there is so much tech, and there's no point going out looking for anything if you don't know what your business is going to do. You need to have this. And like Terry said, if you don't know what kind of tech you need to connect with what, you need suddenly a survey system. You suddenly need all these things coming up. And that's where if you have a roadmap, you have a strategy, you know what's coming up, you know what you want to achieve, you can actually build a tech infrastructure for your HR team. Then you know what's coming up, the business know it, expectations are set. So they know you're going to come with a business case for a HR system because it's already there. It's on your roadmap. You need it for the business, good. Then the conversation gets so much easier. So I would highly recommend if anyone is in a business and doesn't have that, that's the thing to focus on. What are your processes? How can you save time, efficiency? Like what can you bring to the business by having a new system? What does it do? So the bottom line, that's where to start. And that's when you know when you need a new system. At least from experience, that's what's told me you got to get that first, because buy-in is very hard to get if you don't have that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it, again, in my experience, I'm always aware in every one of these webinars, I'm bringing up all these negative experiences that I've had. Trust me, I did like working in HR. I mean, I did it for 25 years. It wasn't all negative. But
it wasn't all bad.
Yeah, there were some really good times. But it's really interesting you saying there about possibly like 2,000 potential solutions out there, tech solutions out there, providers in the market. That's insane. Like that's like, I used the word minefield, I think, when I was like publicizing this event, but that kind of goes beyond. That's needle in a haystack rather than minefield.
It really is.
So
it really is.
It is absolutely. I had no idea there were that many. I mean, I knew there were a lot, but I didn't know there were that many.
I mean, I'm not saying all HRIS, like there's core HR, but like the suite of from, recruitment tech through to, offboarding tech, all the way through your employee journey, there is tech coming out of your, wherever you can find it, like it is.
We'll go with ears.
out of your ears, very Australian of me. And, it's not easy to navigate. Like, how do you even know what's new? A lot of new stuff is coming up. A lot of the AI enabled, agents are popping up and automations, things that you can really, really transform your business. But there's no point jumping in if you don't know what your business needs and where your business is going. And if you don't have buy-in from your stakeholders, because then you're just adding workload to yourself that you don't need to have, really.
So once the decision has been made that you're going to go out and you're going to select some tech, what would each of you recommend as being a few really important questions that people need to ask potential vendors? And Terry, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, cool. I was going to say, once you know it, you'll go onto Jesse's system and say, hey, what systems are out there? And then you'll come to Lemon Platypus and say, hey, can you help us find one? So that should be the route, but no plugin.
And then you'll end up with Suzanne and Peter will take over. So it works for all three of you.
Yeah, against the initial point I made.
Yeah. So
if you need help, you got it.
Yeah, that's it. I would say one of the big things is, and again, and I'm sure this won't happen with anything that you've done. You've come along to your first meeting with them, and you see your sites. It's important to know what you want, and it keeps coming back down to what am I looking for? What do I need? What do I want? Can the system do it? And I would say just challenge all the way, and don't. I've been burnt many a time, whether it was me buying a HR system or me, going out and doing it. That's why I try where possible for any, we have close relationships with people. I learn the system inside and out because I live on the Isle of Man, and we work with people on the Isle of Man. I bump into these people when I've got no makeup on now, but when no makeup on with my in Tesco's with a hangover. I don't want them coming up to me and saying, "Hey, why did you flog me that system?" So I want to make sure if I say it can do something, it can. But the biggest thing about it is challenge that person, that salesperson, to do it. If they don't know, say, "Hey, can you bring in one of your pod guys, one of your dev people, so we can see it?" Try and get a trial site as well. If you know that you need to create a really random, I had to create one with one of our clients, some stuff for Brazil and the holidays in Brazil. So we got on and tried, go on and tried it. Can it do it? Because I think that's the biggest thing is that is the worst thing is you go and buy. A lot of these systems are a lot of money. You want to show that you've got your ROI, and stuff, and then you get the system and it can't do it at once and what you needed it to in the first place. So keep going on, make sure that everything that you need it to do, it can do. A lot of that is you need to know what you need in the first place. It keeps coming back down to this plan and what do we need. And if it can't do it, is it on the roadmap? Can we do, automated this or automated that? Is AI coming? Is this coming? All the things that you might want, is it on the roadmap? Then ask to see the roadmap. When's it coming? Because we've also, it's coming next half, next quarter. And these things never come around. So those things that are really, really important to you is making sure that it can do it all and challenge them. I think, I would say that's like the biggest part of it. And then there's pricing models and stuff like that. But obviously, I let the guys talk about, some of those things. But I would say that's the biggest challenge. Whatever you need it to do, challenge them and get them to see it and trial it. If you can get a trial system, I think that's one of the best things because you can physically play with it. Because that's how I learn, by playing with it, trying to break stuff. So,
Peter, what would you add to that in terms of questions to ask? And
yeah, well, I'll try and flip this to some of the best ones that I've seen, because I get involved sometimes almost from a sort of a solutions perspective, speaking through with organizations who are looking to come on board with us. And to be honest, that's normally a good sign, because when the likes of myself are coming on the call, that's when people have asked those right questions. They have challenged because they are going to that detail, and it is pushing what we can do. I think we've said about pricing, transparency and pricing, obvious, that's key. I would just add to that, there's obviously subscription pricing and there's implementation pricing. Those can be two different things for some vendors. And it's a kind of, I go back to the original support of what support do you need and what are you going to get? And is that behind a paywall? You don't want to end up with a vendor who has a good functional fit, connects to the people's strategy, does everything that you kind of, you need, but then you need in your role support to get it to where it needs to be. And that doesn't exist or that exists and you have to pay almost double the cost of the first year of sort of what you're going to subscribe to the system to. So, some will package it in, others won't, but I think just that transparency is really important. Another good question that I see asked from vendors who we work, from prospects that we work with, is how have similar organizations to ourselves done this? Now, that's a great question, because firstly, it should allow you to understand, has that vendor worked with a similar organization to you? Are they actually used to working with much smaller businesses compared to yourselves? Are they used to working with much bigger businesses? If they can come up with some good examples that they've seen, you can firstly sort of validate that and then get to see the kind of the functional match side of things as well. I think that's a really important one. And again, another one that I see is sort of, how long will it take? Are they coming back to kind of what your key milestones are and meeting that? Because there's a difference there, I think, between a vendor who really is going to get that business requirement versus somebody who is, and unfortunately it does exist in the world, just somebody pushy who's just trying to get a deal done. It doesn't matter what comes through on the other side. If you connect the milestones and they can sort of say what they can do to meet that, or even challenge you, that's the thing. That process should be consultative. And what some of the biggest issues that I see when people come on board, and we have loads and loads of good implementations, we have implementations that don't go so well, and a lot of that can come back to the source where some of those questions haven't been asked, and there's been assumptions made. So, as Terry said, go into the detail. If you don't get into that detail, if you don't connect into it, if you don't get into the trial system view of the world, and you just run quickly, then just the risk and the chance of risk of error, stuff not working, disconnecting in terms of like those key goals that you're setting, just increases tenfold. So hopefully that's just a slightly different view on it, but maybe one that's helpful for those that are listening.
Very. And Jessie, what would you add to that in terms of important questions?
So I love the demo process, like the questions and everything, because it's the one place that you have a lot of control, and HR forget that. So you're the one buying something into your business. You're buying core infrastructure. And, I see a lot of people, they go, oh, we need a new HRIS. They Google around, let's say they find a HR system they want. They click book a demo. It's in their calendar in like 2 days, or even today, because they're like, oh, this is a free spot. Get excited. And they're in the call. They're not prepared. They got no questions. They got no assessment template. They got no idea what they're asking. And they're just like, oh, we're on a project. And, no, like, you have the control in these situations. Like, you are paying money for this system. It is absolutely core. Like, you would not go into a recruitment. Okay, let's pretend that we would not go into a recruitment process to like pick a candidate without some kind of scorecard or assessment, right? We'll pretend that we don't do that. You want to assess someone if they fit what you need. And the worst thing for a vendor is actually having someone who doesn't know what they need, because they like, is this a good client for us? Because maybe they don't serve that audience or that need that you have that's really important, but they can't get it out of you because you're not quite sure yet. So I always think about it like, don't go into a demo call, any call with a vendor, before you have an assessment template, like your must-haves and your, nice to have documented, so you can actually like line them up and have the same questions for every vendor and assess them across each other, because you'll forget. Like, yes, there's AI note takers these days, but you'll forget. And you'll need that documentation later. So my absolute recommendation is you need to go in prepared, but you also need to go in with confidence. Oh, we need this feature. Oh yeah, that's coming in, on Q2. Great. Would you be willing to put that in the contract that we have an exit clause if it's not delivered by then? Most of them are going to tell you no. Because guess what? It's probably not being delivered by Q2. But I tell you what, you can ask it, and if there's hesitation, what's going on, right? So, you can put the ball back in their court. There's a lot of contract negotiation that can happen later down the stage, but definitely, be prepared, have your must-haves, and really like challenge them. Just like Terry and like Peter said, you've got to challenge, you've got to ask the hard questions. And you can also get other teams involved. I got, IT teams involved saying, great, let's talk to your security team. We want to validate your compliance. That's super important for us. And I controlled the first call. I didn't let salespeople control the first calls. They'll push you where they want you to go. You've got to be like, hey, we're here. This call, this is what I want to achieve. These are the questions I have. And I'm talking to other vendors too. They'll ask, oh, which ones? You say, look, we're not going to disclose that at the moment. Well, you can share it, but make sure you share a number of them, because you want to make sure you have competition, even if you're not looking at them, just pretend, So really set yourself up on like a foot, kind of a big, strong step forward, have that confidence, have the preparation, then you'll go in and you'll feel good about it. Because you'll be able to come out and go like, oh, I've got all my boxes ticked, or I don't, and I need to follow up, or actually that tool just doesn't actually tick enough of my must-haves. So maybe we're going to drop it, and you're not going to keep going through that process till 6 weeks later when you eventually go, actually, this isn't the right fit. So definitely go in with some oomph is what I would say.
Yeah, and
I never did that. I never did that. But then I only developed my oomph in the last few years since I started working in HR. I wouldn't have said boo to a goose in my 20s.
It's hard. Kirsty, it is hard. Like, I got to be honest. I did project management before I was in HR. So I did a lot of contract negotiation. I learned from a lot of good people in that space how to do it. Procurement is a profession in its own self, right? It isn't something that, you just have a natural ability in suddenly. It is something to learn. It is something that people can get better at if you're interested. And I think, tech is the future. So if you're going to be working in HR, learning how to do these things is a great idea. We have free templates. We have free, assessment templates online, free business cases. You can just like start from not zero, no blank pages, but just like help yourself, ask people, reach out to Terry. I'm sure her team would, love to help, even if it's just, pointers on the side. Like, there are people out there who want HR to win.
And I think what you said there was really important. It's like, you are in that driving force, and it is your opportunity to, and what's the harm if they say no? You say, hey, I want a discount. They say no, and you're like, okay, I'll decide whether to or not. But actually, the people is, it's the one time, if once you get through the door and if you said, hey, I want to do it, we should have taken the compensation module. The likelihood is when you go and ask for the discount that was applied, oh no, you're post sales now, so you're in BAU and you're not going to get it. To get, even in writing, as you were saying, hey, we can't take compensation now if we don't need it. Can we lock in that price if we do it going forward? So try and push as much as you can in. They say no, you go to someone else, or they say no, and you say, all right, I'll try at least. But the other thing that Jessie said is really important is around getting those IT teams. We've all been in the company, you get your system and stuff, and then they go, oh, can we have the ISO reports? Can we have these reports? Can we have the compliance reports? No, we can't. We had a recent client we were helping, and they had a huge team out in a location. They didn't know if it would work in that location because there were certain restrictions, firewalls in the actual country itself. So we got the trial site, and could they get on it? First thing, if they couldn't have got on it, it would have been, hey, whilst we think it's really nice and it's pretty, if they can't, half the workforce can't get on it because of restrictions countrywide, not actually, company-wide, there's no point. So doing all that legwork up front, I think is really important as well. And because you're also getting your buy-in from some of the key stakeholders. You're going to need IT at some point. They're going to have to do some stuff, so they need to, it's not like that they have to like it, but
there's one thing I wanted to add that I remembered that could maybe help someone, because I remember always in these sales calls, they're like, we'll give you free access to the demo, like sandpit, whatever it is, sandbox environment, for a week, or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And everyone will be like, yeah, okay, that's great. And no one in their right mind at the beginning of a process, because they always offer it at the beginning because they want to, if they have it, they want to get you in and playing around and liking how pretty it is, right? So that's when you say, oh, there's no chance, our team is very, very full on busy. There's no chance we'll be able to get that done in 2 weeks to really look around your tool. Our timeline is much longer than that. Maybe you've got to share it, whatever it is. We'd love to have access for at least 6 weeks. And you just automatically get 6 weeks in. You don't get them to do a week and then another week. Just say, look, it's actually we're not going to possibly be able to do that. And then they go, oh, okay. Or they say, oh, yeah, no problem. We just have a thing where it automatically expires. Just message me and I'll extend it always. They're always probably going to extend it. At least you can ask, because people get in there and then they go, oh, there's no more access anymore. You've had your chance in there. And then they feel really awful to go back. Like, just set it up front. No one's going to know your tool in 1 week. No one's even got time for meetings in a week. So something to add to your belt as well.
That's a good one. Yeah, I never did that. I'd always get it for a week and then completely forget to look at it because other things would come up, and then you're like, oh crap, that week's just gone. Yeah. This is like a tick list of all the things I did wrong. So what would you say are the most common mistakes that people make when selecting a system? And Terry, I'll ask you first.
Common mistakes. Well, I needed to get this in somewhere because I think and it might fall in here, but I'm going to wedge it in anyway.
Go for it.
Yeah, around the whole thing about the thinking about post go live implementation is it's going to take time. We will talk about that on some of the challenges on the implementation, but post go live is around that we've chosen a HRIS. Something like Workday. I only had a team of 6 Workday people underneath me because you can't just do that on top of your day job. You need to have someone managing the systems. You need an IT knowledge within HR to be able to drive some of that. So I think it's really important to understand what headcount have we got within HR to manage the system going forward, and what skills do they have, and what appetite do they have within our organisation to increase it if we need it. So there's no point in getting I keep going back to Workday because I know it's a really intricate system. There's no point in getting a Workday when you've got 2 HRBPs that don't really like tech and won't be able to do your security permissions and reporting and stuff like that. So I think it's really important to understand, and speak to your vendors as well. I know Workday had some calculations on what FTE you would need to drive them going forward. And some of the other vendors, again, pushing on what Jessie and Peter said, just ask them, hey, a similar organisation our size, we're 500 people, what do they do from a super user point? What do they do from an admin point for HR? Because it is going to be work on top of it, even if it's just, adding a new site, adding in changing a workflow, adding in an automation, there is going to be work for it. So I think it's really important to understand that, because that's what I've seen is we go and choose it, all whistles, all blowing, but actually it doesn't stay up to date because they haven't got the technical experience and they have to go and pay for it, or they just don't have the time. So suddenly they're back on their spreadsheets, and your CEO saying, why am I doing performance management on spreadsheets when I'm paying for this system that you've locked in for 3 years? So I think it's a real key one is understanding, that getting a system that is right for your team, in the sense of, hey, we're going to have someone half an FTE a week, 50% FTE a week to work on it, because it can, Suzanne said that's perfect, that's what you need. Or if it's not, actually, all these things, and it goes back to drilling through your ROI, saying, hey, we can't get an ROI on this unless we have a team that can do that. So it wedged it into probably I think it was the right question. That is one of the challenges. Choose a HRIS tool that's right for your team in that essence as well.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to kind of broaden that question out around systems, because I don't know, my perspective, I know we're going to come on to this because I'm trying to do the whole process chronologically-ish, communicating and rolling out training for people in the organization who have to use a new system is where I've seen things go the most wrong in the past. So, HR team are all behind it to get the implementation done, and then you get some stick in the mud employees who are like, well, I'm not using that. And I did it once with a compensation system that was supposed to be going to, so financial services, the bonus round is a big thing. And it was supposed to make the bonus round easier. The managers would be able to input the bonuses that they wanted to give to people, and we'd have their budgets in there. And when it got to it, they were all like, I've done this on a spreadsheet, I'm doing it on a spreadsheet, or I'm just going to write it on a piece of, and they refused to use it, absolutely refused to use it. And we had to abandon it, and we'd paid for this system. But, that was our mistake. We didn't get buy-in from them first. We just went ahead and did it, and then nobody wanted to use it. So it was a complete disaster. I'm gonna jump forward actually, because I'm conscious of time. So this might be a piece of string question, but what sort of implementation times are typical? And I'll ask you this, Peter, first, because I know that's just it's one tool is the same solution, but what does a typical implementation time look like?
Sure. So, in the back of my head, I was literally saying, how long is a piece of string? Because it can be so variable. What we see, we work with SMEs, so probably from around those who are about 100 employees in size. Top end of the scale for us is sort of, let's say, roughly about 1,000. There's sort of variations within that. For when we scale out an implementation, we look at kind of point of access through to starting to roll out to staff, because I think Terry mentioned it. It's sort of that BAU post go live. You can be in that kind of project and adding things on and doing that. I've seen businesses do that for years, and actually those are some of the most effective deployments when they take time, they build in new functionality. I always talk about the concept of hooks. What's the hook that's going to get the employees bought in initially? So to your piece, Kirsty, when they're coming back to kind of, that bonus bit, how have we incrementally gained their trust so that moving away from the spreadsheets that they're really attached to just seems a sort of, a simple step because everything else is there. So we have done an implementation in 2 weeks. I think I aged about 2 years doing that. I would never, ever suggest to come in that hot. Sometimes business needs dictate it, and that organization was quite small and we were able to work. We had to channel so much resource in, and they did as well. Our rough timescales to that sort of testing launch phase vary between around 8 to 12 weeks. Sometimes it can be a little bit longer. And what I suppose the thing is here, the message that I would go is like, that's our average. That's the approximation. When clients ask that question, that's what we'll say back to them. We never try and prescribe that, though. We say this is the approach that we've seen others follow, going back to the kind of what do other businesses do? Can you get it down to an average? But it comes back to the kind of, what are your milestones? we come back to that whole, people strategy, connect it into the system that you're building out. What's going to be the key deliverable that you need to land? That's actually your kind of time frame to work back from there. Now, good vendor should say to you, that's crazy. You're not going to be able to do that, or that's going to be really, really challenging. But we always talk about working in collaboration, because each business is unique that we work with, and we don't try and just prescribe the same approach, because you just end up then falling into mistakes, trying to rush things, trying to push things through. And as I say, it's sort of part of it is conceptualizing what does implementation mean. But like I say, we roughly sort of say until we start to roll out live to staff, but it can be that there's certain functionality pinpointed around key kind of landmark points in the year. So when does your performance cycle run? If you've got performance management, when are you doing your compensation planning, budgeting for the future year ahead? And if you you can then set the scene in your mind as to what the timeline is, and that's then actually what your implementation window is. So when I say sort of 6 to 12 weeks, I'm talking are very, that is literally an average of what we do, but there's so much variation in there. So it's sort of, and as I said, coming back to it, a good vendor should understand that from the start with you, should work with you, and you should be aware of your kind of milestones coming into it as well.
And then, I mean, unless, Jessie and Terry, unless you think that, you've seen implementation be completely different to how Peter's just described it.
I mean, I would love to just comment on it, just because I think it's really not thought through well in part of the process. It's one of the most important things is the implementation. Like, you choose the system, but then you got to get it in there. And I have seen it done very badly. I was also part of, trying to make it work in a very, very short time frame. So old Jessie just did what she could. New Jessie probably would have pushed back and been like, no, we need extra resources to get this done in the time frame. That same, company I talked about that was scaling. I got there in November. We needed a new ATS and a new HRIS, like 2 core infrastructures, so that we could actually meet goals that year. Ramp up for hiring started for the summer in April, beginning of April. We didn't have, that was all we had. And we got it signed by end of Jan, both concurrently. And I was responsible for build and run, because if you want to move fast, build and run together works quite well. And we did it with a very small team, me and someone very good with like data, people analytics team member, and another project manager that I brought into the team to do more of the other projects we had. And we had internal comms help us with some of the change management, but we did it in 6 to 8 weeks. We got both systems out. That was a feat. Do I recommend it? No. You should always ask for more budget. You should always push back. But do we do it? Yes. And I think what's important about projecting time is there's time to do something, and then there's time so effort to do something. It's going to take me an hour to do this, versus am I going to get an hour this week to do that because I have all this other stuff going on, right? So it's always like, how long is it going to take you to do these things? And then what else have we got going on? What is your BAU load? How many hours do you have available this week to get going? Can we justify with the, return on investment calculation? Can we get a contractor in, and can we justify this to help it speed up? Can we get more resources from the implementation of, the tool? Can they give us more? And, we asked them, to help as much as they could, but a lot of it was stuff you have to do on your side, So really understanding time and effort to do something versus time it takes with all the other things you've got going on.
Yeah.
And starting the conversation early. Like we had an internal comms team member. They did all the, change management, the comms, the all hands, the emails, the whole journey, because you have to build that up so that by April people are using new systems. So you have to focus on that when you start thinking about a new tool, not once you get to like implementation time. So that's something I'd also add to make it more successful. Definitely roll that in. Sorry, I'm going to be quiet now because I know we're running out of time. But I just want to add that because I think it's important.
It's really valid. So Terry, I'll ask you about what advice would you give people around, Jessie called change management, the kind of communication around, bringing in a new system and the training that you do? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so I think one of the key bits is, and I think it actually touches on the last piece, but what we tend to see is, especially around the change management, well, it's not change management, it's, especially people who are changing off of HR systems or changing onto processes. It's something's working this way and we want it to continue to work this way. It's like, if you can take a bit of time, you've got crummy processes going in, even the tool, it's gonna, even with a nice fancy new tool, it might be crummy processes, and it's like, hey, it's the same system, but now I've got smiley faces. Yay. So on performance management, you know what I mean? So we always say like that, take a bit of time to evaluate what your processes are, so you can have, so if we're going out with a new performance management tool that's really well, go and find out what some of the problems with your old performance management. It probably wasn't the tool that you were putting it in. It might have been actually, I've got 20 people reporting into me and it was taking me 3 hours per person to complete it, is actually, do we need War and Peace going in and out? So, take that time too, you've bought a nice new system, take the time to think about what processes is. You can't all the time, in Jesse thing, they had to get the system out. And sometimes it's like, we need to get it out and actually we'll review it afterwards. But I think it's really, really important to do that. But comms wise, again, I think there's two ways to look at this. We've paid lots of money. I love my new HR tool. I love HR, but is everyone going to love it as much as I do? Maybe not. So it's making sure that you don't over communicate with, it's like every week saying, hey, the new system. By the time the system's there, they're like, I've got fatigue because I heard about this great new system that all I'm going to do is go in and book my time off. So it's making sure that, there's that nice balance between what's coming with and making sure that you don't over do it. But we work with a lot of systems and they say, hey, it's a system, it's social, it's like you're on Facebook, it's something like that. You don't need you don't need training, but everyone needs training because it's not actually the system to use the system, it's actually how your processes have been applied to the system. So what's really key is like, I'm a manager, it's the first time I'm hiring someone. What do I need to do? Where do I need to go? Especially if it's not in my core HR system, because I might need to go somewhere else. Or, hey, I want to change and update my address. Or, hey, I want to promote someone with my team. Where can I need to go? Because that's the worst experience. If the person can't work it out, they're not going to bother doing it. So they're going to go and talk to the HR admin. They're like, why do they keep coming through to me? Because I just don't understand where I need to go. So making sure that you have got the, it doesn't need to be War and Peace training guides. A quick video with, hey, a quick snippet video. Hey, you need to request a job, do a job requisition. Where do I go? Manager looks at it once, perfect stuff. Having that training available when I'm suddenly become a manager, saying, hey, these are all the toolkit that you might need to be a manager because you might need to request someone. So it's making sure, I think, having those things available when for people, because that's when you lose. I think you lose it and people's buy-in, and also losing people's buy-in. Always make sure last thing you do is checking people's holidays balances, because the first person thing they're going to do is they're going to go and check their holidays.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Trust me, it was the first thing. Everyone was like, my holidays are wrong.
Yeah, my holidays are wrong.
Like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and you're like, oh my God. So carry on. We've got we're cutting off on this date. All your holidays won't be in, because I've sent an email about it 3 months ago that said you can't put holidays in your old system after this time, and you still have, and stuff like that. So it's that's a key bit of advice as well going forward. Then make sure someone's holidays right, and then they can't do the CEO's salary.
We always explicitly say to those that we're working with through implementation, particularly those who are going quickly, have you checked and are you happy with things like balance, ensuring what people can see? Have you, like, even if you haven't gone through UAT employee testing before launching, which we would always say, that's you've got to do, like, unless there's something that's stopping you from physically doing that, you should always do that. But for those that, as I say, those that we see run quickly, we are saying do that, check that, because you can kill months of hard work. It's fixing the foundations first. It's not sexy, but you get your data right, you get the fundamentals in place, because employees are going to have limited access, generally speaking, in terms of comparatively to your super users. First thing they're going to do, can I book holiday? Is my holiday right? And if either of those two things are a no, then immediately you turn off the sort of, the people who are going to essentially validate that you've done the right thing in making the choice.
And you do, because people have like that much interest and attention in it, and it's like, if you've got something about me wrong, then I'm not using it because the whole system's obviously garbage.
I think, but we went live on a system last year, and we suddenly get it, and they were moving off quite a big system, like well-known system, onto a different system. We suddenly, as part of the implementation, got loads of address changes coming through, and me and the project manager were like, oh my god, the data wrong. And we went out to all these people, and they're like, oh, we didn't bother changing or updating on it because it was so hard to go and do. We didn't bother doing it. It was really easy to do it because I had an onboarding, it asked, and I was like, oh no, I moved out of my mum's house 2 years ago. You have that panic, because it would be a system that's easy for someone to use, because they are going to just dip in. We might be in it all day, every day, but they're going to be dipping in and out of it. So I think that's important.
That's really true. Yeah, very good point. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm gonna just ask one more thing. Jesse, you mentioned earlier about in a rapidly scaling company. So I kind of had a question in here around future-proofing your investment. So I guess this comes to scalability, and what thoughts do you have around how you can try and put that protection in place so that the tool that you buy continues to support your organization as it evolves?
It's a good question. Again, it comes down to the first thing I mentioned in the call, which is you need to be part of those strategy discussions. You need to know where the business is going. You need to be part of the finance discussions. This is like senior, HR leadership. The people in the project need to understand that. If they're not fed that information, if they're not shared that information, if they don't really understand where the business is going, they can't assess effectively. Sorry, my child's running around crazy. Just got home. Oh God, very excited. So, those are the kinds of, that's the thing where if you don't plan and don't understand where the business is going, you can't plan for scalability, you can't plan for future proofing. But I also say, like, tech has a life cycle. Like, it's not going to necessarily be with you forever. Gone are the days where, you have a company for 50 years and got the same system for 50 years. Like, most of the businesses that are alive now weren't even alive like 5 years ago. So I think you got to pick what suits you now and into the reasonable future based on the business trajectory. And that sounds like not a non-answer, but there really is no answer other than to really understand your business and be part of the discussions, document that, be part of it, and explain the impact of like systems onto, to the leadership. That's part of the business case. That's part, this is going to get us to, X amount of countries. If we're going to expand into this region of the world, it won't cover it, but it's going to cover us up to here. Are there any plans to expand into Asia? Yeah. Yes, no. Is it going to cover, whatever it might be? So yeah, that's the answer, unfortunately. Yeah, it's hard, but I always, for the scaling company that I was in, it needs to last at least 3 years. At least 3 years. And in the third year, we could start looking at the next one to then move across in the next year. At the latest, with the scaling that we had planned. And that's fine, because at some point you get to, maybe you do need a workday at some point, 19 countries, 2,500 people, multiple sub entities, lots of things. Maybe you do need something more than what the I'm not going to say average because they're not average, but the less complex, less enterprise systems offer. But that being said, the systems now are pretty good. So Workday is, used to be the only one on the market, but there's so much now that does so much of the complexity and very easily. So, it really is understanding what's available as well. Really understanding. I think if you don't do the discovery phase, you're choosing from a small bucket of eggs, right? And then you go, well, these are the best ones. You want to be like, what is just like candidates. You want all the candidates. As many as you can, good quality ones. You can be like, oh, I can choose from the best, right? If you only get this amount, you can only choose the best from that. So I think that's where Stacked is why I also started it, because I was like, people aren't finding tech. People just, 3 big names, or I heard someone else use that, and that was the shortlist. And it's like, let's widen the net. Let's understand the market. Let's see what's new, and then start assessing what's the best.
That's a great point. I'm interested in your take on that, actually, Peter. So do you, Cezanne, do you think about, this is a solution, because you said you work primarily with SMEs. Do you think this is a solution that will last people sort of 3 to 5 years? Do you have that in mind, or are you continuing to develop so that you can accommodate larger?
Naturally, as we've continued to develop and sort of the way that our products grow and the landscape of our products grow, and our sort of addressable market increases, and we're working at the moment on lots of things that we can do to help with those more complex organizations that have some of those quite specific challenges that sort of enterprise level solutions tend to be or have historically been the best fit for. So, as an individual organization, that we're looking to do what we can to increase and serve those larger markets, but we're also realistic in who we are a sweet spot for, and I think that's important as well. We've always done really well in that 100 to 1,000 sort of employee organization space, and there's so much growth, a lot of it, and it's actually one of the most rewarding parts of my job. We're fortunate we've always developed kind of functionally deep system functionality, and that means that I can see organizations who I went in and trained when I was getting started in the business, who are still there now, and they started there, they were at 40 people, and now they're at 700, and we've been there throughout the sort of the entirety of that journey. That for me, that's job satisfaction, when you see that and that you've helped someone for that length of time. We design very much in the hope that we'll retain people for as long as possible, but we're also realistic in that we can't do that forever, and that there will be certain things, that organizations will grow to such a large size and such a level of complexity that we won't be an ideal fit for them. And through our success teams and conversations we have, and it's about being transparent at that point on both sides, on an organization's perspective as sort of as Jesse was saying, and from a vendor perspective as well. We do the best fit that we can for you, but there are some who've kind of flown the nest, and we've kind of gone, that's fair enough. They're not in our target market size. We'll do everything we can to try and keep them, but you're not going to satisfy everyone. Just as we continue to grow, some of those small organizations, really small organizations getting started, they'll probably be better fits, but we'll be there hopefully for that next stage of the journey, and sort of to take them through the next 3 to 5 years if they are growing at that rate. And that's part of the market, and part of how we've grown and developed over the years ourselves.
Yeah. Terry, anything you would add to that in terms of future proofing? And have you, I'm not sure how long Lemon Platypus has been going, but have you had repeat clients yet who have outgrown one initial tool and then had to move to something different?
So not in that regard, because we've mainly just been getting people on their current tools, but they have been moving off of other tools. And like I said, we actually had a company that went from a large tool, but they got carved out of a larger organization and had to go to a smaller tool. But their people were used to large organization, what the system could do. So we needed to replicate that because we didn't want it to feel like a step back as well. So I think that's important. And I think that's the other thing as well. In today's economy, you really need to assure, especially up at front at the contractual stages, hey, I hope we're growing. What happens if we lose a site? What happens if we do that? We still need to pay subscription fees on 100 people. So it's like, whilst you don't want to think about that, it's trying to think about future proofing in a lot of ways. What are the clauses for if people, if your headcount goes down by X amount, and stuff like that. So I think that is really important. And it's sad in this day and age, in the economy at the moment, that's what you need to think about as well. Absolutely. But it is just, it all stems back down to what everyone said, is just trying to work out what you want at the beginning, because a lot of it, you're in a subscription, you're going to be in for a while. It would be great if you weren't, if it could be a rolling thing, but then you're not going to get as good as prices, because that's when the prices come down, isn't it? So making sure, but sometimes it isn't. 12 months and you say, hey, this isn't quite for us, but the amount of money that you've spent in implementing, taking time out your BAU and stuff like that, is trying to make sure that you get it right for at least the first 3 years, like Jesse said, because it's taken a lot of time and effort and change management. If suddenly you're changing your system again,
you don't want to do it again in a year.
The company like, oh great, another HR tool, another time I have to check my holiday balance, stuff. I have to learn by the time I'm done.
Do people stay longer than 3 years in companies these days? I'm not sure. So I think we're safe. We're basically safe. We're safe for 3 years now.
Yeah. No, but you're absolutely right. I think people do move around more than they used to. They definitely do.
That's an interesting thing that we find is that we get a lot of return customers because they've gone somewhere else and they said, hey, you helped implement that system. We've been telling HR they really need it because it was great. So that's how we've been brought in. Our last client who we just implemented at the end of this year, this is the 4th time they've implemented the same system, but in different companies because they've moved around. So it's great for us. It's just like make sure that we do a good job because then they come and ask us to come and help.
Absolutely. I see Deborah's just put a comment in there saying, I know a company that switched after 3 months as the company had oversold and underdelivered. Oh, no fun. No fun for the poor people involved in that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I honestly could talk about this for hours, but I've put the LinkedIn, I put the links for my panel's LinkedIn profiles into the chat, or you can just look them up. They have all got fairly unusual names. So Peter, you're on LinkedIn as Peter Merritt Hall, aren't you? So
yes, in the process of changing my name after being married to Double Barrel. So LinkedIn's updated, but legally I actually need to get onto that one.
Yeah, I still haven't. I got married in 2017, and I changed it to Kirsty Baggs Morgan by default, but my passport and everything is still Kirsty Baggs. I've really got to get around to changing all of that. So I think what I've loved about this conversation today is the different perspectives that you each come from. I think it has been actually really complimentary. So I'm quite proud of myself for putting that panel together, I have to say. So you've all, I hope that those of you watching and people watching the recording will connect with Jessie, Peter and Terry, because I think there's an awful lot of expertise that they can each give you wherever you are in your process, and an awful lot of help out there that you can access. So thank you very much, all of you. It's been really lovely to have you, and I shall get this uploaded to the app as soon as the recording has downloaded and I can add captions to it. I'll pop it up on the app. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Kirsty. And thanks for everyone who joined.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.